This room is now locked. Shit. Oh, well, I don't know how this shit works. Whatever. Yeah, camgirling is the near opposite. Work is carried out independently. Others in your field are essentially competition. It's a field that relies on individuated branding, and it's piecemeal. Beyond all this, one must be one's own boss. Even that window of resistance is foreclosed. As the value form seeps into all remaining zones of authenticity, all we have left is one 30-something hippie guy holding a free hug sign, and even he is thinking of jacking it up to a quarter. Alienation has had a general trend towards increasing to a point of general lack of socialization. This is certainly worse with men. This has a positive feedback effect with commodified socialization and sexuality. The motivation to alter and improve oneself to be accepted in some human community disappears. The man-child and cam-girl dance their endless waltz, and all are the worse for it. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. There's this running topic of conversation between me and a close friend who we're both sort of influenced both by Buddhism and anti-capitalism. And I asked them jokingly one day, like, what's the key to enlightenment? And they said pure alienation. And I found it to be like more sad than I wished it was, but also kind of true because, like, I don't know. I think it's a definite topic for the time we live in because we're at a point where, like, I don't know, the alienation is more pure than it's ever been, and it's good that they're distributing the vaccine now, but it's still like, I don't know. I kind of get merciless with people. On the one hand, like, I feel bad that everyone's, like, outlet has been taken away, but, like, on the other hand, like, everyone says they're traumatized by COVID because, like, all their plans were interrupted, but, like, what were their plans? A bunch of, like, self-absorbed pettiness. I'm kind of glad that, like, it all got interrupted. But, like, that alienation is pure right now. The alienation is more pure than it's ever been. And it's like...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, I mean, I'm not necessarily, like, I'm not necessarily in agreement on this as, like, a good thing. I mean, I think, like, and the lack of free socialization is a concern, but it's like, is it, I mean, what proliferates are, like, cults, right? So, like, I don't know, Pete, like, I think, like, the cult form of was, like, sex, like, the way that politics forms cults. That, like, you get, I don't know, like, AA has replaced social organization, so it's just like societies, like the surplus population ends up in the cult. So like there's like rhizomatic formations of socialization. They're not like there are arborescent forms of socialization. They're not like rhizomatic, freely associated. Like, and the difficulty of that. So like there's an article that like Bernie created Burlington Punk or something, because there was some venue that he like let people book for cheap. But it's like the space for like community formation or like micro societal formation or packs is like very it's externally determined, and it's going to vary. So it's like, yeah, I don't really think like we're benefiting. What you might have is more individuality, but not necessarily. I mean, what we've accelerated self-selection into like QAnon. You got QAnon popping up as kind of like it really is like it maps onto deleuze, because it's like all the leftists are going like schizo, and then like all the right ones are like all forming into this one paranoid like giant structure where everything's like lumped in together. So they're like, arborescent madness or like rhizomatic madness. But he does posit like the schizo is like the only individual like absolutely alienated, but kind of like alienated and loving it. But I think like it's I don't know, don't deterritorialize too quickly. Like Nietzsche has like a passage on like how you build a personality. He's like, there's not a lot of people with personalities. They're constructed through periods of loneliness, or no, periods of like primarily solitude and like disciplined schooling and like the like I don't know, like learning a hobby or something. But like he has that notion of like pathos of distance, and Deleuze kind of criticizes that in the Leibniz book, where the pathos of distance is for monads, but we're nomads. We establish connections. We have alliances, and they're freely like we have alliances, not affiliation. So, like, if you're are you just associate like born into this, or did you choose this? Like, did you form a multiplicity? Did you establish connections? Because like the whole ethics, I think of like Deleuze is like establish connections between strata, find routes of escape, find openings for desire. So it's going to be something like a celebration of the experimental nature of human interaction and the building of great bonds. And like the relationship with Guattari is one of love. It was an alliance, and they kind of you may have retained an individuality, but you bring out other people's emergent properties, because an object contains virtually emergent properties that are not activated. They're not actualized, and you don't know, but your knowledge of them is incomplete. So you're going to need to experiment with like connections of objects to produce emergent results, and that means like in the social, try making friends. Like I don't know, like don't listen to alienation. Like I mean, don't listen to Buddha. Like your attachments matter. Like
100% agreed.
But there can be a way to like. I mean, like what would I say? Like need some alone time. Like I need to find out who I don't know. Like there's a sense where like getting out of resisting like your arborescent relations, your filiations, and like not just I don't know, like don't just live for your parents, man. Live for you. Don't live out the other's dream.
I mean, it's sad how many millennials would actually benefit from hearing that message.
Yeah, like I don't know, something like I think like Machiavelli might have said something like parental disapproval is the price of greatness or something. Well, who cares who said it? I don't know. Been misattributing quotes all week. Why not? Why not another? So we'll continue talking about that. I was gonna jump over. We're talking about some. All right, continue. See what's up.
Well, I sort of have just some thoughts about like the rhizomatic in general, and maybe you could direct me to like what chapter or whatever of like Thousand Plateaus really introduces it. But I mean, for a long time, I was like an arborescent like fanatic. I was like, I considered myself like orthodox Marxist, Leninist, rah, and like I was really into this idea that like centralization, like is necessary and primal and virtuous. And now I think like I would say I'm sort of halfway between, like I value a hybrid structure between arborescence and rhizomatism, where and for anyone listening who doesn't know what that is, like arborescent is like a tree, it's sort of got a central trunk. Rhizomatic is like a network of like fungal roots that doesn't really have a center. So but the point is I've sort of lately been more attracted, or at least more open to the rhizomatic perspective, because sometimes your subconscious mind is smarter and more radical and more honest than your conscious mind. Sometimes capital controls the conscious mind because like what you need to do to survive, and you internalize like the expectations of the system. And then like when you're in your like it's like why people take psychedelics. It's like they dissociate the arborescent part of their mind and they get in touch with the rhizomatic part of their mind. And I think like the rhizomatic part of your mind is closer to your body, like all your little random nervous web works. Like, so when you get in touch with this sort of like non-centered part of yourself, like sometimes you could argue that the body has its own mind, and that's like sort of made of like, the muscles and sensations. And your conscious mind is always trying to impose this plan on your body, but your body has this like this other life experience where it's like, you might have your ideas, but then there's what you are and who you are, like in a physical sense. And that like these two things are not always in like sync together correctly. And I think emotions are a very big part of like syncing up this sort of like mental body division. um, but I guess I would say the biggest reason I'm attracted to rhizomatism at this point is because like I think we're at a historical era where it makes sense to pass from words to deeds. And like basically like as much as I value certain things about the Leninist party model, where like Lenin was always, there was like sort of like a silliness to it, where Lenin was always trying to impose like a central committee structure on work that was like intrinsically rhizomatic because it was secretive. And like and sometimes like creating that arborescent link between the little rhizomes actually was beneficial, but sometimes it was just impossible and impractical. And I think like, yeah, we're at a moment where uh like to me that like the most militant action like can't like you can't really do it in like a national organization that has legal 501c3 recognition. Like you kind of you just got to do it on your own with people. And that's why I'm sort of attracted to like seeing like the punk scene as this like potential revolutionary army, where like it's founded on the like a rhizomatic basis of individuals and bands. And so you
I
can
wouldn't
use that.
trust the punk scene for that much. I think they've that's mostly captured by like I don't know, like the endless activism that goes nowhere. As they used to say, but it depends.
I agree that there's definitely a lot of that in it.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
like I wouldn't put the whole zone of responsibility there. I mean, there's definitely a lot of overlap. I mean, I just it the punk scene, whatever. It's a scene. It's a pack. It exists.
Well, that's the bitter thing, because like a lot of these things remain ideas, and then there's the scene. It actually exists. And that's sort of like I once heard someone like early in my political development, back when I was very close-minded to this kind of thinking. I was like, well, we need a revolutionary party. We need, like ideology, blah. We need this. We need action. We need that. And he was like, okay, all those ideas might be good ideas, but who are people who actually do things instead of just talking? And his answer was basically punks. And I was like, that's weird. And basically, I think his reasoning for that, this stranger who I don't even know, was that basically like there are different personality types between people who talk and people who do. And that, that's a valuable thing you gotta like I don't know, just like select for or be aware of as you organize.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we have like a norm of like um, universal expectations where it's like no, but there is a division of labor, I suppose, and like uh, differences in like actual desire of like what people want to do. And yeah, like there's more you can do in a state of secrecy than you can in like the public face. So like, there's always these requests of like, oh well, if all this needs to be done, then why don't the professors do it? And you're like, well, they might go for that one guy in the city with the book published on anarchism when everything starts blowing up. Like, it's it would limit you, but it's like it might limit what you say, but not necessarily. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it definitely limit what you can do, and but that's the thing though. Like Lenin was still like underground revolutionary, just like arborescently. So it was like a micro state, or like a state in formation or something. So like they were both acting outside the law and acting underground, but they weren't. Well, even like the SRs were kind of unified, but they were much more like I'd say rhizomatic. But then like what happened in Russia was like they may have had their structure of the party, but like when the when like the February March like revolution happened, it was all like micro politics, because like when the revolution comes, like the party will fail you, like the people will advance beyond the party. Like I don't know. I don't know how the unions played into that. I thought they did. I thought they didn't. But it's like a union might be more arborescent or something than like a group of workers acting for collective interest. But still, it's like it's a community of desire, right? So like, it's not just like the interest of the party, which like I think ends up being a problem. But you have something like, you can have a more arborescent structure than that, or something like you have like the union, but then like beyond that is like, well, the party, and like you have no influence over the party, and like Lenin did shut down like independent working class organization. He did like destroy the anarcho-syndicalist rail workers union. So when there came an opening, Lenin did try to seize it all for the party, and it's ended up like coming out with like shooting against SRs at one point, like regardless of like if Lenin was justifying this, but like when the time came, you know, he didn't really like just make alliances with the other people, the other like competing factions, and like that's the problem I have. Well, of course, but like though, I wouldn't say Lenin's revolution really came about like necessarily arborescently. Like, I wouldn't give that much credit. It was kind of like the arborescent capture of like an event, which may have like pushed it forward or something. I don't know what could have happened, but like assuming forward and backward and like advance, decline, like assumes a continuity when there's a series of ruptures, and that like Lenin didn't. It wasn't all just like the Bolsheviks. Bolsheviks came in at a certain point and directed things in the name of their interest. But like so it's like the way you would describe rhizomatic organization, I mean, it can be it applies beyond just like party organization. It's just like a form. I mean, a structural form that can be applied to anything. So why that differs from, yeah. So like you don't have a firm progression. There's no teleology. So you're on 3 dimensions. You're not direction. You're not like really oriented along any of the 3 dimensions per se. It's different structures of redundancy, and you're composed of curves, not lines, and you're following emergent structures. So you're going to have something like the curvature pull of gravity acting on what would otherwise be seemingly a straight line. So let's say like and it's emergence, and it doesn't mean that everything is like linked together. That's the problem with like you end up with like one link in these fucking things. I don't know. What always happens is like what you have the party with the wrong person gets in and then fucks it all up because they have like rhizomatic power or arborescent power over everything. Or you get a power amassing because you end up being like, I like the despot priest relationship for this, because like you don't really have like formal power. You have like, you create a micro society that privileges the interpretation of certain people and the word of certain other people. So, like, the Trotskyist despot and like their cadre priests, and like that's the social formation we end up with when like you want to have like resistance to capitalism. And but then it comes down to like everyone has to have the right interpretation of Marx, who has to have the right interpretation of Hegel, and like I don't know. It's like the basis of unity is not a like collective enunciation of desire. It's something far different. So like I think this is kind of cultivated by kind of like the coming insurrection. And the way I would describe it is like no, one way to describe it is like revolution versus insurrection. And insurrection is making the state unfeasible in a certain space. And the state functions through projection of power. So you cease the capability of effective projection of power. And you know that I mean the U.S. military never took the current Gulf. This region of Afghanistan, very mountainous, that the U.S. military heard there's like Taliban there or something, and they tried building one base, and every time the soldiers left the base, they get picked off, shot at. They had a bunch of combat gear. Their radio stopped working in the heat. Couldn't function out there. The grades of the mountains were too steep for them with their gear. But like Afghan soldiers, whoever had a gun, I mean, you know, I don't know. Whatever formation it is, it's like it's still basically like it's still that relation to like the state to like I don't know. I want to say like defend property, but like to prevent the functioning of the state, or like to prevent apparatus of capture. They use like like they shot in such a way that bullets would ricochet, making it hard for soldiers to exist. They couldn't get helicopters down into the ravines. So like there was this kind of like method of resistance that stopped the state from functioning. It's not necessarily what rioting is, but like you could think of this as eroding. It's not just civic virtue, but it's partially eroding civic virtue. So if you can I don't know, normalize not snitching, that you like what does he say, like that for secret society to function, you must move like fish through water, but society must be like water to fish. So you kind of, it's not like a formal recognition by society that you're like doing great and like helpful. It's just like to function as a secret society, you kind of need like general amount of society to at least be okay with you. And it doesn't mean they need to join you, but it's like there's always some information that escapes, or you need minor aid or something like. But also, you slowly develop social norms that involve not offering information, and if you can create I don't know, if you can make the state afraid of you, you can get freedom. I don't know. Insurrectionary.
Yeah, there's this
deleuze.
word. There's I know we might have the same or maybe differing opinions on that whole theorist Gene Sharp, but one thing I found interesting in his book, he lists 198 tactics for nonviolent resistance, and there's this one called Tactic 66, total personal non-cooperation. And it's like that's the beginning of all real resistance. It's that like you cease to cooperate, you withdraw your cooperation, and then that's something that like you can sort of spread as I don't know, just an ethos to people that you hope would be an allied population.
And I don't know what did the drill tweet say? Like, in an age of universal surveillance, telling a computer you don't know what Pringles are is like an act of resistance. Like, almost is. It's like, I don't know. It's shit like you kind of saw in like the alt woke manifesto. It's like, yeah, like I don't know. They're operating off of big data. Fuck up their data. Increase zones of opacity. Yeah. Withdraw cooperation. At the other end, it might be like, what do you know? Like, what kind of a counter hegemonic truth formation can you come up with? What black box have you gotten into that people don't know about? I think it's that I thought was like one of his points with Foucault was like getting like all this information about what happens in prisons out into the public. And I think like one thing I really liked within like the IWW, they had a blog going for a while, what a Reformation blog or something. But it was just like workers talking about work, and it wasn't necessarily like polemical, didn't have to be technical, but it was just like this is the day-to-day shit. And, like you're you're getting information out from where it normally isn't, and it's going to apply like a lot more to like probably whistleblowers. But it's like, what does it even mean to be a whistleblower when it's like every restaurant steals wages? Like, are you going to talk about? They're like that's new. It's not like new news. You might like pick out one, and somebody didn't know about that one, but it's like pervasive shit by now. So I was thinking, more probably the other industries. Yeah, finance, military, whatever. Makes kind of like the, I don't know, the whistleblower, the spy of liberation or something. All right. Yeah, so like Deleuze seems to like celebrate arsonists as like monomaniacal productions of the working class with like I don't know, like fixations, obsessions, often around justice, but not necessarily. It's like an extreme figure, but like that's what you end up like. You could say like rioting is a mix of like arsonists and looters. They exist in a symbiosis of means and ends, as crime is a capture of that which is not legal, that which you are not legally entitled to, and looter and arsonist as like monomaniacal, passional criminals. And,
To this, we could supplement vandalists.
what? Vandals?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
vandalism is sort of like arson without fire.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I think it fits. And like, so it's like what subjectivity is like Deleuze against, right? So it's like the cop, the judge, and the priest. the priest is the interpreter for the despot, or some other figure. I mean, cops enforce the law, judges choose, they decide, they judge, they bring it down. But he doesn't really bring in lawyers here. He's like almost defensive of lawyers. It's like, you gotta be the lawyer of the damned. Defend them against the priest of high reason. And like, I don't know, has a fixation on jurisprudence. Thinks it's like I don't know, worthwhile subjectivity as opposed to these other ones. Sometimes you may want to act like a lawyer, but cop, judge, and priest try to lay off. But he also says at this point, it's like people aren't motivated by. It's like there's no such thing as ideology. Like, reject that concept. Interests are just something for a chart. I mean, they can be betrayed, but you can't betray desire. It just is. Like, if I act on my desires, I can't say, "Oh, I didn't get what I." If I don't enjoy it, I at least knew I wanted it. Interest, you kind of have to convince someone they want. So he's kind of seeing like insurrection, this rhizomatic kind of revolution is about opening up desires, people's desires, and actualizing them in the real world. But I don't think he's like that, that optimistic about it because of the way like he premises Germany in this. So you both see like he sees like Germany is like, well, that's a bad rhizome. That's the liberation of antisocial desires. That something of the desire, the formation of desire had already be there in Germany for like something like Hitler to happen. And in a sense was like an actualization of a lot of like, I don't know, resonating micro-fascisms that fit together in a way that through Hitler Youth and SS and SA and random fascist violence and through the church and social institutions that were either beneficial to them or didn't turn them away out of like the ability to like beat to create like a fear of communism that would justify just about anything. They're able to build something that was not as stable as probably even the Soviet Union. But was also going to, it's going to destroy itself. But like, I think that this concept that like when desires get actualized in some kind of space, it doesn't always go well. Like a smooth space will not save us. It's just a zone where potentially forms of liberatory, creative, non-externally controlled forms of being and becoming can exist. But like, this is why I say like in America, it's like, I mean, let's say like Chris Cutroni's like, you know, if there was a crisis of the state, the left wouldn't win. Like, state fell apart tomorrow, we lose. So I think it's like, it's very much like dependent on like, what are the actual, just like, is it just people just like I don't know how much of America just wants to be like, I just want to drive around with a gun and shoot people. I mean, look at like I mean, when there's a state like that, when there's a state of crisis and the state falls apart, in New Orleans, you had right wingers show up, just shooting looters, wanting to keep the peace or whatever. However they frame it in their minds, just wanted to go around shooting people, black people, really, you know, and like that's going to vary specifically on the location. And I think like there's I don't know, it went worse in Germany. And I think like, but I think there's going to be that inherent plurality. I think you're going to get that, like with the orange vest. I don't expect or yellow vest. This is why I kind of like justified some of negative shit about the yellow vest, where it's like, okay, you're allowing for a space where people are going to like articulate desires, like enunciation, action, desire. It's all coming out in the open, but it's not all going to be good. It's not all going to be what you want. And that's why it's like a, you know, it's a struggle for space, a struggle for defining something that has no concrete definition. I don't think it's like, yeah. I don't know. It's comparison. I mean, it's not like the Nazis weren't arborescent at all, but yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Are you familiar with the Purge series, the Purge movies?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I guess they're just sort of like a good fleshing out of like how like this like repressed desire can be unleashed and it can have reactionary or revolutionary consequences. Because probably one of the best ones, Purge election year, was about how the Purge was started by reactionaries and then it got hijacked by revolutionaries.
Yeah, I mean, specificity of norms, nomos, whatever. And like you know, that's another thing. It's like when he's talking about like nomadic social structures, he's talking about like diffuse collective mechanisms that function instead of like the you know the singular concentric rings of power that form from the state or with the state or whatever. But like you gotta develop those. Like I guess I don't know if we have like how much we really have going for us so far. Like we break up society into what, and like stuff emerges, blah 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 over time. But it's like it's not necessarily less cruel. It's like the nomads aren't necessarily less cruel or like I don't know, or like less violent, but it's like less arborescent violence, more nomadic violence. You're going to have it. Yeah, I mean, because it's like one of the benefits, I guess, is like, well, only the cops have to carry weapons in a civilization. You could think, and then like, well, you didn't. I don't know. It's usually like the state. The state, it kind of assumes that there's already states, assumes it's already there. So it has like a different kind of, it has a more intense violence. But I don't know. Does a diffuse collective mechanism mean that like you have to be prepared to be violent, or is there going to be violence? And like, are we necessarily trying to minimize violence as our only criteria, or are we trying to say like what form does it take, and who does it, and how is it structured, and what kind of accountability is it? And I think like that is the question. I wouldn't want to frame things just in terms of like we need to minimize violence, because I think like Deleuze already ignores that. He's like, well, war is inherently against the state. If the state is against war, war is against the state. And so from the start, you're like, okay, well, it's not like it's maybe not a fact like this factor minimization theory that you're going for with your understanding of violence, but yeah, I don't know. To build a war machine. That was it's like his answer, and I think that might be open for some interpretation. But we have something of like function more like a pack. Don't have like permanent organs of power that are all centrally formed. I think like one thing that I think like might have been an interesting experiment in history is if we took the Soviet Union, and instead of creating the Soviet Union through the Bolsheviks, we had multiple centers of power that composed the social revolutionaries, the Mensheviks, and the Bolsheviks, and a kind of like, yeah, I mean, kind of like keeping like kind of like checks and balances, but not formal, but kinetic balance of forces, kinetic, martial. That hopefully was like constrained by a desire by a desire of alliance. But I think like that's the kind of the crippling thing with states is the unitary nature of right. I guess like even deleuze was talking about like priests and despots can be different. They can have like different zones of like focus, or they can have like they can be kind of competing powers in a real way and competing influences. And then I don't know. That kind of goes away after a certain point with the state. I mean, wait. I'm not going to say the church is a war machine. I mean, it's like it's in certain places the church can function like it's like its own secret society of maliciousness or something.
So would you say that like the Leninist Party organization was an overly arborescent war machine, maybe?
I mean, I don't think there's anything war machine about it, but it's like the war machine does not. It uses war, but doesn't have war as its end. I just no, I mean, I don't see. It was a martial. It was a martial force, but like it's kind of like nestled in. So it's a war machine. The state captures the war machine, appropriates it for the sake of war. But then, like, Lenin appropriated the war machine from the state. Kind of like he was just able to organize soldiers. Yeah, I mean, Lenin captured the war machine, I think, because like I don't think that Lenin brought in soldiers in a way that made them the leaders of the group. Like it was still Lenin in charge. It was still the Bolsheviks, but like they were able to persuade enough soldiers at the right time to side with them, and then as like soldiers started, as there started being like rebellions against the Bolsheviks and people started rejecting their rule, it would happen a little bit at a time. So you'd have enough people that you could put down every revolt, and eventually kind of culminates in Kronstadt. But since they didn't happen all at once, Lenin was able to deal with it. And by then, he had most of the people with the guns on his side, and was able to kind of officiate power over time.
Yeah, having recently been rereading Russian Civil War history a lot, I find myself shocked by how much I still sympathize with the Bolsheviks, despite all the critiques you can make. That it's like, I just sort of, I don't know. I guess I'm just still sort of a statist, because I think in a world of states, you sort of have to have like the revolutionary state becomes like the proletarian war machine, and like I don't know. I don't really think there's any other option for now, but yeah.
I mean, so I kind of contrast a little bit with Yugoslavia, because like Lenin took over the capital You got the Constituent Assembly out, alliance with the soldiers nearby, and I think mostly started spreading influence from the West. But the partisans kind of built up slowly of like at will participation, secret, grew up secret is a secret resistance, and they had like a military structure, but they weren't like a party that later, like they weren't like a party that later became whatever. They were primarily like being able to take land back by the people who lived in it and on it, and like that small kind of dense taking of area. That was kind of like a slow and steady thing that I think made them much more densely, like their power had more impact and more density because they didn't have like a bunch of other resistances. They were competing against. They weren't primarily ideological, but there was some of that. And they kind of created an armed populace that like was centered from the ground up, kind of. In those areas, you're the people with the guns. And that like that form of like that form of resistance, I think, was more conducive to making something that like, you didn't as much have to worry about every country in the world invading you because you like have a citizen army that's already everywhere. And that like the resistance of small arms can make a professional army of mercenaries not necessary. And I think if you have like citizen armies that don't have a distinction between the state and the people with the guns, that like the militia is the citizenry, you can end up with something like you're more likely to have like a free city. But it's harder to tax people who know how to fight. I think like you end up with something that, at least in Yugoslavia, like came about pretty, I don't want to say democratically, but like pretty much with the sentiment of the people. Whereas like I don't know, like Tito was not a fan of like the revolutionary defeatism of Lenin, and like I don't know, the Bolsheviks were mostly winning in cities. There was a huge war, and they were just picking up soldiers who were coming home, or like getting people to like jump off the front lines as opposed to like creating them. But then they ended up enacting conscription anyways. But like they weren't like in the area of the creation of what formed the process of formation of like the partisan army was not different than the formation of like not like secondary, that like it came up, its creation was its struggle to power, whereas the Bolsheviks kind of took power and then had to have a civil war to get it. Like their civil war had already taken place by the time they took power. Lenin enacted a civil war, or like, yeah. So I don't know. I think that like I think something like how do you resist a state? Something like Yugoslavia. How do you go without having a state? But like they still have state, right? So it's like Mao up to 49. Like what could you have done? Well, you could like socialize production, and like Graeber said, like since time immemorial, the the platform of the left has been abolish the debt, free land. I don't see that ever not applying. And like, if you had something in the Soviet Union, like no conscription, yeah, like the free land to the peasants and socialized factories. You, I don't know. States might have invaded. They might control the parts of the area they had, but you know, you just whoever wants to shoot them, shoot them. You have citizens militias that still function without the centrality of a, and they might have a centrality, but without the centrality of the state necessarily enforcing conscription. I mean, the SR
I don't know.
wanted to have like a volunteer military to go back to fight the Germans. It's like lunacy, but at least they were like thinking like, oh, like those who want to pick up guns, not like, oh, we had a revolution last week, we're like having conscription now against you. That's why a lot of people like I think Mankno still had conscription anyways, but some people are like, well, that's why Mankno was bad.
I've shifted to a different perspective on Lenin, and like to borrow from his own words, the revolution's decisive victory, such a victory will be precisely a dictatorship. It must inevitably rely on military force, on the arming of the masses, on an insurrection, and not on institutions of one kind or another established in a lawful or peaceful way. It can only be a dictatorship for realization of the changes urgently and absolutely dispensable to the proletariat, and the peasantry will evoke desperate resistance from the landlords, the big bourgeois. Tsarism. Without a dictatorship, it is impossible to break down that resistance and repel counter-revolutionary attempts. And I really align with this because Lenin saw himself as a continuation of like Robespierre and Cromwell, who realized that, like, unlike the American Revolution, where we were simply seceding from an overseas aristocracy, the English and French revolutions had to fight a domestic aristocracy that had much more deep ideological like roots in the minds of the people it oppressed. So it just kind of like, I've heard it said that a lot of the class war is actually a fight within the working class over which way to go forward. And I think it's true that like revolutions don't start from a majority. They start from a mass minority that imposes its will. And then through the process of struggle or the process of holding power, then they change people's minds. So it's just kind of like, I see the dictatorship as something primal, as something as resulting from desire. It's sort of like the natural human ego that like comes from, it deals with subconscious matters, it expresses subconscious matters, but it also must regulate and moderate. Like when you're up against the full force of the bourgeoisie and all its ideological control and material control, it might be better to have blocking troops. It might be better to have a gun to your back when you're fighting. Like they held hostages.
Structures. Like, what's the point?
Sorry, what?
It might make you more effective, and there's certainly more of a discipline to the military than there is to the war machine or the warrior versus the soldier. But that kind of like that structure of compulsion that like the state appropriation of the military introduces allows for such great abuse and horror. It's like the financing structure of a state like allows you to have like artillery and big bombs. Like it's definitely not just small arms. That's for sure. And yeah, I mean the problem is like nobody's like, I don't know, nobody's gut sense of like this isn't right ever kicks in or can when you have like a arborescent structure of orders, and then you have somebody who has, well, I mean, I think like with the Bolsheviks, like just kind of had czars who. I don't think there was much accountability to to Bolsheviks who had machine guns.
There was zero, yeah.
But as far as is it effective? It may be more effective. You might fight better with a gun to your back. I don't know. But a big point was Napoleon didn't really do that, and got half of Europe on his side.
He also was a monarch. I mean, he had power. Hey, my phone's at 1%. I'm gonna go before it just cuts out randomly. But I think this was good. We can continue this rock and roll. Long live hysterical materialism. Later.
Take care. Let's see. Keep going. All right. Give me a second. All right. All right, man. 2 hours. Fuck yeah. All right. Back to books. Let's do. Okay. So, theosophic anti-humanism. So, say pride, not narcissism. Sloth, not laziness. Return to religious terminology, because that's what's valuable in religion, and it can be useful sans divinity. And we can keep categories and analyze in terms of intuition, reason, affect, and phenomena. So, taking some stuff from Sorel on this. I was trying to put Sorel into a different kind of context that would mix with Deleuze. So, anti-humanism. So, think of the human body as an egg or something. Yeah, everything is an egg. You have your thresholds and transversal lines. You're outside. You're on the outside. So, think of human experience like an egg. Get on the outside of the experience. Who's on the outside of the experience? Non-human. So some human is always we don't know everything a body can do. Some human is always reaching, doing new things, new states, new intensities. All experience is radically singular. Snowflake. Snowflake-oriented ontology. We're all unique beings. Everything is unique. Difference is fundamental. But there's always some new human experience adding to the total sum, the full body of human experience. So you're always furthering the you're always on the frontier of human experience. As you expand the frontier, you expand what it means to be human. So what is humanism? Well, there is no humanism. It's going to change over time. We add new parts to it every day. New desires, and new states, and new intensities, inner states, sensations, whatnot. They're going to make up what it means to be human. And the theosophic part, that there might be something in religion worth preserving, and possible subjectivities that emerge in religion that are worth having. So this I would categorize as embracing the religious modes of being of zealot and martyr, without really a figure of the priest per se. What does it take to be an assassin, a passion and a death wish? Nietzsche says about danger, said, some run away from it, but the great run towards it, as a virtue here. Sorel said that even if there weren't many, the tales of the martyrs meant accepting that for this you may die. Why they would do this was an image of the kingdom of God that spurred affect that determines the will. This image we call a myth. Phenomenologically speaking, is what is the experience for the person experiencing it? How does it appear to them? Or how does it not appear, but express itself to them? Appearance and essence is a dichotomy we don't deal with. Blah, blah, blah. There are no fixed essences. go. But yeah. So phenomenologically speaking, this is the relation, whether it be true or false. We act for a future we cannot be certain of. That's like Marx tried using a dialectical structure, but then instead of transforming into communism, we instead transform the regime of circulation from precious metals to fiat. So when capitalism did Aufhebung itself, it did not go where Marx said it would. Now, but this Engels kind of does this too. He's like, oh, well, now we have finance capitalism, and the next system is going to be capitalism. Like, we know we had a change, but that's not the change we wanted. But we'll get there. Like, we just missed a couple steps in the dialectic. Like, it's a flow chart. It's a diagram, and because you think of certain things coming up on that diagram, because that's what would come up if the diagram were true. Does not mean you've proved that like that's the way things are going to break down. You might say like capitalism breaks down at X point, but like to know what it breaks down into, well, that can't be known with certainty. It's a lack of information about the future is an inherent process of existence. You don't even know about universals, like that very structure of like that structure of thought is like kind of limited there too. Like you can't speak with absolute knowledge about groups of things because of their inherent difference. Morality of traits. And because it's nominalism, it doesn't tell you anything. You just establish a definition. You can't, from that definition, obtain more information. All right, so we instead transfer from the regime of circulation from precious metals to fiat currency. Materialism really appears to take a hit here. Like, there's nothing material in that dollar. Why do you care what it does? Like, something else is at play. That's non-material. It really short circuits the inevitability scheme of how and if an absolute crisis of overaccumulation comes. So what's supposed to set this whole, like, what's supposed to destroy capitalism doesn't really apply. It's got to be something else. So we had our limit. We thought that was there, and then they did fiat currency, or like even outside of fiat currency, you can have like potential permanent financial manipulation with just finance capital, and it's the infinity of finance capital. It's infinite nature. That can be, something out of nowhere. You can't necessarily back all that. I mean, I think like Bretton Woods fell apart because of the imbalance between what finance, the potential value of the finance capital that had been established, and or like Q4 maybe, and the amount of gold did cause problems and like produced the fiat system, but the fiat system just really makes a lot of that shit just not matter anymore. Specifically this mechanism. I don't know if like Simon Clark even really addresses it. Like Jehu, damn Jehu, real movement. Like he's like, no, this is just barbarism. Like this is what Marx meant by barbarism. The collapse of exchange on the basis of values already happened. Workers like are beyond exploited. Like value is taken, none is given to them, and like it's, I don't know. Dollar has no value, and then go from there. Get a kind of different system of economics, slightly modifying Marx, but like there's something to capital that needs to be modified with fiat currency, and I think like Deleuze tries to address this, and other than Jehu, no one really does. All right, so the myth Sorel puts forward is that of the general strike. Unites the affects, forms more uniform will, where different aspects are united in a direction. A conviction not to be easily overturned. It's not merely a result of rational deliberation that may soon be overturned, but a religious conviction, a passion for a passional event, with intuition playing the role of former of unity of the perception. From this comes heroes. In no weaker words, Sorel says to save the world. And what must accompany a general strike? Glorious proletarian violence. but as of the logical form, there must exist here some degree of proletarian violence, which given the nobility of its ends, would merit glory. Sorel, though, isn't a fan of lawyers and says the French Revolution was caused by a surplus of lawyers and doesn't really like democratic formality, but is somewhat approaching Deleuze's concept of the pack. So he wants to get rid of democratic formalism. What his structure is for the anarcho-syndicalist union that's supposed to bring this all about is something like a secret network of affinity groups of consensus, something like that. It's not necessarily the totality of the population. It doesn't even have to be a majority. But it's martial virtue, are prepared to be violent, are prepared to die, and, express this as a religious conviction. It is not merely the result of reason. And yeah, I mean they're not primarily concerned with being able to prove something to others. So don't make them like they used to. They said the most political work is toiled in obscurity by people whose name you will never know. It's the working class does have some ethical backbone to them. They're, through their work, have a sense of dignity, and that revolution would essentially come from workers demanding dignity of free producers for themselves and for others. Somewhat praises Proudhon, but when it comes to the general strike, he's on point. The problems with Marxism and running in elections, it's passed on through the years. The left com's kind of figured out the problem. When you end up captured and enmeshed in the state, he called out a lot of socialist politicians. He's like, what are they going to do? Keep the peace, make peace. They're always talking to those right wingers. They're going to be friends. They're going to be chummy, and they're going to swindle you. They're liars. They want you to be passive because they have to be able to offer that. So even if you strike for something, let's say you have a partial strike, even a general strike. All workers in the city get $3 an hour or more, or else we'll return to work. Or else they won't return to work. At the end of that, if you get what you're demanding, it's the job of the politicians to get you to go back to work. They have to maintain their credibility. They have to be shown in game theory to be working with you properly and cooperating. So even the idea of the partial general strike, that the IWW still kind of wants to go on about all the time. It's not even what he's talking about. He's talking about absolute general strike, permanent, coextensive with insurrection. And that's the thing is over time, the politics of union organizing and the tactics of insurrection have broken apart. There's been a historic rift, rupture, not rupture, yeah, a rift. And they're not unified in the same moments, or are they able to be? The unions are legally recognized organizations. That this formalizes the they're captured, their energies are diverted into grievance procedures. They're determined also by the state. Passions wither on the vine, and when you're waiting for a result from an NLRB election, you fall into a state of passivity. It's just another one of the so I capture energy. And even the like IWWs within the like legally recognized structure, but it's like a if the state recognizes you, how much of a threat are you to it? Can't be much. You're trying to play by their rules, and it's like you're in a state of alliance, and he's like, we don't want the reconciliation of opposites. That's dialectics. We're not doing dialectics. Whereas like how George Searle Lamar can like act like Searle as a dialectician is just like absolute nonsense. I mean, it's just calling everything a dialectic because there's two of it. And it's really insulting to like make claims about someone when they've like told you earnestly the exact opposite. Like there's a paranoid structure to Hegelianism where like everyone's a crypto-Hegelian. It's like looking for communists everywhere, except the opposite. So, yeah, I mean, and there was like an absolutism, I guess, to Searle and all this. Always approach the infinite, approach the absolute, no partial, no blah, blah, blah. Except in terms of like unity and multiplicity, but multiplicity and absolute go together for him because it's not a moderation of any particular thing. So yeah, preserve the theosophic, and it's like, yeah, I'll read something on that. So, give me a second to pull this up. Yeah, I mean, people complain about Marxism for being too millenarian, but might be what you need, right? I mean, he's often referencing like how like powerful like he's like, look at the early Catholicism like a political movement. What gave it power? Its conviction around an image, myth, a collection of images, and that was the kingdom of God. So it's like it really is like millenarian socialism. So, oh shit. Fuck. Hold on, let me figure this out. Hello. Shit. How do computers work? Can you still see me? Am I in a room? What's going on? God, man, watching people fiddle around computers probably just the worst. All right. I don't know where that request went. Shit. All right. Yeah, if you had a request to join, just do that again. I don't know how the hell to deal with that. Oh, fuck. All right. Well, is it blocked? How do I do that? That would, those shorts. Fucking knows. All right. Back to what I was saying. I'm just gonna pull up something on leftism because I think it is in line with this. Yeah, so I'm going to defend Searle from like accusation. So Searle defended martial virtue. That is fine. That may just be like being a good pagan. I see no problem here. He's just talking about like celebrating warriors and glory, and like it produces like virtuous people or people who are like ready to act for something, and like produces some kind of strength of will. Like courage, strength, like praises these, but he also wants his cake and wants to eat it too. So it's like still kind of praising Christianity, but like praising the ancients at every chance he can, and even the ancients, like, I don't know, still thinks Aristotle was a bitch. Like, doesn't like all of them. And he kind of like thinks that before Athens, there's like a more noble Greeks. There were more noble Greeks who like weren't corrupted by the concerns of like slave owners to just create an ethics of go along to get along. You know, like absolute absolute non-reconciliation of interest between parties. No fucking golden mean, no medians. Just like ethics lies in the absolute. Like if there's anything like yeah, I don't know, like hysterical materialism. That's it. But like the opposite of, but I would posit like the opposite. So hysterical materialism is opposed to what? Marxism, autistic materialism. Something that is like not recognizing of the emotions, affects, and desires of people, and is focused like strictly on like being derived from reason. It's the same fixation on reason that Nietzsche pointed out in Hegel. Same thing that deleuze said about Hegel, and it's been a problem ever since. It's like half the way that idealism is used is like to short circuit any concern for people's like individual subjective being, or that or functions as a determinism in practice. So yeah, I mean, I am contrasting that with Marx. This is like no, and the production of desire, desiring production. Like production of desire is always production of it's like material production, and vice versa, and that like you have desires that are produced just in the production of desire, society, and yeah. I mean, Marx focuses on interest instead. Fuck. Anyone know? All right, fuck. There we go. So, hyper-left, pseudo-left, and hyper-left. Hyper-leftism is revisiting of what a current left must mean that does not shy away from accusations of being too idealist. It's a reorientation away from a positivist left, from a pseudo-left that has already acclimated itself to failure, and from a left that comes to reject the insights of political philosophy that were formerly already incorporated into Marxist thought. We correct for excessive shifts in reaction to former sways in the left. As accelerationism was a kind of overcorrection to primitivism, we must correct for other excesses. All right, one version of our International contains the lyrics, "And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields." And Morel describes the general strike. The one final drama to bring about the savior, to save civilization. It moves the soul. Like Plato's poet. Let's take this view of history seriously. History is a grand narrative, and the impending class wars are final act. All forces of revolution and reaction will largely coalesce into two camps. The forces of revolution will at least cease to accept their slavish status. At last, this will be more than a fleeting gesture of resistance. It will be a contest for power. Immiseration theory people claim immiseration theory is false because historically people don't overthrow a government when things are at their worst. So Sorrell has a point about this where he sees like, I think it was really carried out with Bernie, where he's like, revolution comes from the working class's ascendant, because they, their pride makes them think they want more. I think their pride and sense of power impels them on. They won't just take anything. And there's a sense when you're like winning strikes that like the pool of resources from which you're drawing is infinite. So like you tell workers like, oh, we can't afford another raise. Like, fuck you. Like you could afford the last 4. Like, put up or shut up. Like, if you get to a point of power where like, yeah, I mean, you're able to advance beyond that, to go out of business, or you take it over, or you foment a general insurrection. But that's not, yeah. So, not necessarily what I'm saying. The forces of immiseration theory is false because historically people don't overthrow a government when things are at their worst. Sure, but that's not the point. The point is that ceteris paribus, the worse things are, the greater people's objective interest in revolution becomes. This may involve some lag effect involved in accepting historical trajectory, falling out of a belief that the current immiseration is temporary or something of the I don't know. I mean, I think there's like a lot of there's a lot of factors influencing what somebody's going to do, but like, if workplace injuries were at the rate of soldiers in a war, why not just go to war against the workplace? I mean, people are, yeah. I mean, you can. What's the say? You can apply the marginal. You can apply a marginal structure even to acts of violence. At some point, you cross the limit, and you change assemblages, and you fuck it, start to resist, because why not? Like, that can happen. Or people can just kind of starve to death and put up no form of resistance, or as often happens, yeah, as we were talking about earlier, you have like petty crimes functioning like financial literacy. Like, what is financial literacy? What does it mean to know the stock market if you can't afford stocks? Yeah, it's useless. So yeah, in millenarianism, all you Marxists are just millenarians. Well, then so be it. We live at the edge of the end of the world. Only Marxist revolutionaries take seriously our divide between socialism and barbarism, or as the schism choice presents itself to us, either hell or communism. The dialectic of history, master-slave dialectic writ large. The class struggle plays out throughout history, a tension of rulers and ruled, eventually resolving itself in the final class war. At this point, I think it's kind of oversimplified that like not everyone is in a master-slave relation. That kind of like in accordance with the state, whereas like a pack and a leader of a pack are not master and slave. Materialist idealist dialectic. Matter produces a certain consciousness. This consciousness then reflectively affects reality, but beyond mere sensory input, we have the spurious clash of signifiers and clashes of wills that add to a materialist world. These are the idealist side that interplays with materialist determinism to create the materialist idealist dialectic. We go too far in rejecting Hegelian's idealism instead of turning Hegel on his head. Let us turn him on his side and reinvigorate a sense of reason in history. History is more a bunch of contingent shit, man. But it's oriented towards something. It's oriented in a bigger way because it's towards a change of assemblage, not just modifying the presidency. And in that sense, Marxist revolutionaries are in line with the kind of accelerationist notion of Deleuze. So let's talk about like what acceleration means for Deleuze and why and how it affects Marx and his relation to Nicolay. So I'm going to read the original passage when I find it in Anti-Oedipus.